Haven't you had enough of everyone telling you how you should spend your golden years? Like you owe it to the world to keep hopping from one social event to another? Hi, it's me, and I want to have a real conversation about why, as we get older, many of us stop visiting people as often. Maybe you've noticed this in your own life. When you were younger, you might have been the person who popped in on friends without a second thought, always ready for a chat, a coffee, or a spontaneous meetup. But somewhere along the line, that energy shifts. Instead of running out the door at every invitation, you start pausing. You find yourself thinking, do I really want to go? More often than, why wouldn't I go? I remember the first time I realized I was pulling back. I had a friend's birthday party on the calendar, and I just felt tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with a nap, but a deeper, emotional tired. I forced myself to go, but the whole time, I was counting the minutes until I could leave. On the drive home, I thought, what happened to me? I used to love this stuff. But then I found some statistics that made me feel better. A 2024 report from the National Council on Aging revealed that nearly 60% of seniors admit they've intentionally cut back on casual visits. Over half said they feel better, less stressed, more content by pruning their social obligations. So if you're nodding along, thinking, that's exactly how I feel, let's unpack 6 reasons why visiting less often isn't something to feel guilty about. Instead, it can be a sign you're growing wiser about where and how you spend your time. 1. Energy isn't limitless, and that's perfectly fine. Think back to your 20s or 30s, when you could go from a full day of work to a dinner party, then out for drinks, and maybe still wake up early the next morning feeling okay. For many of us, that boundless energy fades over the years. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you learn to pace yourself. A 2024 study by the American Geriatric Society found that older adults often mention energy management as a primary reason for cutting back on socializing. Physical energy is one aspect, but emotional energy is just as important. Small talk in crowded rooms, navigating traffic, standing for hours. These factors accumulate in ways they didn't when we were younger. My friend Elaine realized she no longer had the stamina to attend back-to-back gatherings. She said yes to everything in her 50s, only to collapse in exhaustion. Once she started choosing events more carefully, she found she was able to savor those she did attend, and she enjoyed the quieter moments at home far more too. 2. Peace of mind matters more than ever. We've all dealt with social situations that left us drained, frustrated, or outright upset. In our younger years, we might have powered through to avoid hurting feelings or to keep the peace. But at some point, you realize your own peace is just as important. A 2024 survey by the Senior Wellbeing Institute found that 74% of older adults deliberately steer clear of environments that trigger stress or conflict. Maybe it's a family member who always wants to argue, or a friend who thrives on drama. Life is simply too short to voluntarily place yourself in tension-filled scenarios if you can avoid them. Consider Robert, who used to visit certain relatives monthly out of a sense of duty. He dreaded every visit. Arguments erupted over trivial things, leaving him emotionally exhausted. One day, he asked himself, why do I keep doing this? So he stopped. Instead, he switched to phone calls or occasional emails to stay in touch. His relatives complained at first, but Robert felt he had to prioritize his own well-being. Eventually, they adjusted, and he no longer loses sleep dreading those gatherings. 3. There's no place like home. Really. Have you noticed how home feels more comforting with each passing year? You might have pictures of loved ones on the walls, a favorite chair that supports you just right, and 1,000 small touches that make you think, this is truly mine. For many, home becomes less of a base you leave from and more of a destination you choose to stay in. According to a 2024 report by the National Institute on Aging, over 65% of older adults say they feel more content when they focus on enjoying their own space. This might be as simple as sitting in a sunlit room with a cup of tea, watching birds outside your window, or listening to your favorite music without having to negotiate with anyone else. It could also mean discovering new hobbies, like knitting, painting, or gardening, right in your own backyard. My neighbor Carol once forced herself to keep up with a busy schedule of lunches and social clubs. Then she realized she was happiest tending her garden or inviting a friend over for iced tea on her patio. The shift was subtle, but it brought her immense peace. Now, instead of driving all over town, she creates a space for friends to come to her, and everyone benefits from the relaxed atmosphere. 4. Your social circle might shrink, yet deepen. In one of its longest-running studies, Harvard concluded that meaningful relationships have a bigger impact on happiness than wealth, fame, or even raw health metrics. But meaningful doesn't necessarily mean many. In fact, as we age, our circle of true friends often becomes smaller, but more intimate. Linda, a college acquaintance of mine, was always the social hub. She had 1 million connections: co-workers, old school friends, neighbors, extended family. As the years passed, her circle organically thinned out. Instead of trying to maintain superficial ties, she now pours her heart into the relationships that actually feed her soul. She has a few close friends she can call at 2 a.m. if she's worried, or meet for a comforting talk over coffee. And you know what? She says she's never felt so connected. This pruning process isn't about pushing people away. It's more about gravitating toward those who truly uplift you and letting go of the obligation to keep in touch with everyone. It's also about accepting that others are going through similar life changes and not feeling guilty if you're not as socially busy as you used to be. Sometimes, less is more. 5. Priorities evolve over time. What you cared about at 30 might not matter much at 60 or 70, and that's perfectly normal. Maybe you spent years juggling work events, family gatherings, or community obligations. Now, your focus could be on personal development, spiritual growth, or simply rest. For a lot of people, the idea of downtime transforms from a luxury into a necessity. A 2025 survey by the National Council on Aging revealed that many older adults prefer activities like volunteering, developing hobbies, or caring for grandchildren over instantly running from one social engagement to the next. Hobbies that once got pushed aside, like writing poetry, tinkering with a musical instrument, or even birdwatching, finally get their turn in the spotlight. Take Mariana, a retired teacher who used to plan elaborate events for her colleagues every month. When she left the workforce, she realized she didn't enjoy large gatherings anymore. She actually craved solitude and creative expression. She took up pottery, and now she spends weekends shaping clay in her garage-turned-studio. She still meets up with friends, but on her own terms, focusing on quality rather than quantity. 6. Real friendships don't require constant FaceTime. We often grow up thinking if you don't see someone regularly, the relationship will fade away. But as time goes on, you discover that true friendships can handle gaps, whether it's months without a call or years without a visit. It's less about frequency and more about the sincerity of the bond. A 2024 study by the American Psychological Association supports this notion. The most enduring friendships among older adults often thrive despite infrequent meetups. One woman I know has a friend who moved overseas. They send occasional letters, and once or twice a year, they chat on the phone. Yet when they do talk, it's like no time has passed. There's no guilt trip, no, "Why haven't you called?" Instead, there's genuine joy in reconnecting. If someone pressures you to show up constantly or makes you feel guilty for not visiting enough, consider whether this dynamic is really serving both of you. True friendships should leave you feeling supported and understood, not anxious or obligated. Health and mobility, another factor. We can't ignore that physical health affects our willingness and ability to go out. Maybe you have arthritis that makes driving painful, or perhaps you can't stand for long periods, and certain social events don't accommodate that. It's completely reasonable to say, "I'd love to see you, but can we meet in a place with good seating and easy parking?" If someone refuses to work with your needs, that's on them, not you. My former coworker, Jim, developed severe knee pain in his late 60s. He used to love visiting people on a whim, but he found it increasingly painful to climb stairs or walk long distances. Rather than stop socializing altogether, he got creative. He invited friends over more often, scheduled meetups at parks with paved walking paths, or simply chatted via video calls. Yes, he visits fewer people, but the visits he does manage are more comfortable and genuinely enjoyable. The difference between chosen solitude and isolation. Some might worry that scaling back on visits means risking loneliness, but there's a big difference between chosen solitude, where you genuinely enjoy your own company or prefer fewer interactions, and forced isolation, where you feel cut off and unhappy. If you're excited to spend a morning reading a good book or tending a quiet garden, that's not isolation, that's self-care. If, however, you notice signs of depression or an overall sense of emptiness from seeing people less, it might be time to reach out, whether to medical professionals, a counselor, or supportive friends. Local senior centers often run programs and outings that provide social engagement without overwhelming you. Technology also helps. From phone calls to video chats, you can stay connected even if mobility issues or distance are obstacles. Embracing quality over quantity. When all is said and done, the real theme here is quality over quantity. It's not about being a hermit. It's about choosing interactions that nourish you. Instead of spreading yourself thin across dozens of superficial visits, you invest in meaningful ones that leave you feeling genuinely fulfilled. Imagine finishing a cup of coffee with a dear friend who truly listens to you and reciprocates with warmth and insight. You walk away feeling renewed. Compare that with attending a gathering out of obligation, spending hours making small talk, and returning home drained. Which scenario adds more to your life? For most of us, it's the first. Breaking the myth of eternal busyness. Society often tells us we should remain busy or on the go to prove we're still vital. But busyness doesn't always equal fulfillment. Some of the happiest older adults I know have schedules that might look sparse on paper, yet their lives are rich in meaningful moments. Be it a tranquil morning routine, a hobby they love, or a weekly phone call with an old friend. There's nothing wrong with rejecting the hustle mentality, especially if it no longer aligns with your well-being. Slowing down can be a profound act of self-respect, allowing you to savor the things that truly matter. In closing, it's your time. Own it. So, we've looked at 6 major reasons why many of us cut back on visits as we age. Finite energy, protecting our peace, loving our home sanctuary, keeping a smaller but stronger social circle, shifting priorities, and recognizing that real friendships aren't about constant FaceTime. Add health considerations into the mix, and it's clear that visiting fewer people doesn't mean you're losing your sense of community. Often, it means you're refining it. If you've been struggling with guilt over declining invitations, or worrying you're not out there enough, I hope this helps ease your mind. You've earned the right to choose how you spend your days. If that means fewer gatherings and more quiet evenings at home, so be it. If you still thrive on social interaction, that's great too. The point is that you get to decide what works best for you. Life isn't a contest to see who can squeeze in the most visits. It's a journey where we learn to nurture ourselves and the people we genuinely care about. So go ahead. Decline the invitation if it doesn't serve you. Invite friends over on your terms. Pick up the phone when you feel like chatting. And never forget that real connection has more to do with mutual understanding and appreciation than how often you show up physically. Thanks for spending this time with me. Here's to embracing the peace, comfort, and genuine relationships that make this stage of life so meaningful. Remember, it's okay to slow down and enjoy the path you're on. After all, you've more than earned the right to live life at your own pace, with no apologies necessary.